All the people that helped Camilla get the crown on her head were excluded from that coronation, and they were furious. And not only that, Kate and William were angry too.
At 76 years old, King Charles has finally confirmed the truth about a story that has circled around the royal family for years, a story that many people thought was only a rumor whispered in the dark corners of palace halls. It was the story of Queen Camilla's alleged affair with a royal guard, a rumor that for decades was dismissed as nothing more than gossip created to damage the image of the monarchy. But now, the king's own words have opened a door to questions that cannot be ignored anymore. The truth, whatever it may be, has once again placed Charles, Camilla, and the entire royal family under the bright and unforgiving spotlight of public opinion. The dramatic moment came quietly, not in a press conference or a grand interview, but in the silence of a private royal chamber where only Charles and Camilla stood. In his hands was a photograph, one that showed her in the company of a guard, a man who for years had been rumored to be closer to her than most people ever knew. Charles did not shout, he did not slam the table, he did not let anger take control. Instead, he used silence, the kind that speaks louder than any words. When Camilla entered the room, she immediately understood something was wrong. The air was thick, heavy, and tense. She saw the picture on the table and knew what it meant. She tried to laugh it off, to brush it aside, saying lightly, "You're reading too much into this, Charles." But the king's face remained cold and still, his eyes locked on her with the weight of years of mistrust, pain, and history. That moment was not only about a photograph. It was about everything Charles had lived through, the tabloids that had haunted him, the scandals that followed him since his marriage to Diana, the whispers that never seemed to die. And above all, it was about the shadow of Diana herself. To the world, Diana was the Princess of Wales, the woman wronged, the woman betrayed, and the woman whose tragic death still breaks hearts. To Charles, she was also a constant reminder of his failures as a husband and the heavy cost of choosing love in a life ruled by duty. Seeing that photograph of Camilla with another man brought back all of those ghosts. The king's voice was low, steady, but filled with the kind of pain that cannot be hidden. This was not only about jealousy, it was about survival. His reign was fragile, his health had made him weak, and he knew that one more scandal could destroy the careful image he had worked so hard to rebuild. For Camilla, however, this confrontation was another battle in a war she had fought all her life. She had been accused before. She had been hated before. She had survived being called the most hated woman in Britain. She had lived through cartoons mocking her, headlines calling her a villain, and society whispering her name with disgust. Yet she had outlasted it all. She had walked through fire and come out wearing a crown, standing at the king's side as his queen consort. But this was not the court of public opinion. This was the king himself, her husband, and in his voice was not just suspicion, but also warning. She looked at him calmly, her eyes steady, her face unreadable. She did not confess. She did not deny. She gave nothing away. Her silence was her shield, but that shield was dangerous too, because silence can be seen as strength, or it can be seen as guilt. Between them, the photograph lay on the table like a weapon, small but powerful enough to shake the very foundation of their marriage and perhaps even the monarchy itself. For Charles, this was not simply about a woman's loyalty. This was about the future of the crown, the trust of the people, and his own ability to carry the weight of kingship. For Camilla, it was not only about defending herself, but about refusing to let the world, or even her husband, strip away the dignity she had fought for so many years to gain. The room was silent, but that silence was louder than any argument. And in that silence, one truth became clear: the past was not finished with them yet. The ghosts of Diana, the scars of scandal, and the burden of love in a life of duty were all still alive, and they had returned to haunt the king and his queen once again. To truly understand why this moment shook King Charles so deeply, we need to look back at his long and complicated life. Charles Philip Arthur George was born on November 14, 1948, into a world still recovering from the scars of World War II. His grandfather, King George VI, was on the throne at the time, and his mother, the young Princess Elizabeth, was preparing for the role that would soon define her life. When Elizabeth became queen in 1952, Charles was just 3 years old, but from that moment onward, he was heir to the throne, a boy carrying the weight of a crown he would not wear until decades later. Growing up as heir to the throne was not easy. His childhood was strict, shaped by duty and expectation rather than warmth. He attended Cheam School and later Gordonstoun in Scotland, a school famous for its harsh discipline. Life there was tough, but it built in him resilience. He was even sent to Australia for 6 months to study at Timbertop, a campus of Geelong Grammar School, which gave him a taste of freedom and a glimpse of life outside the suffocating bubble of royalty. Later, he attended the University of Cambridge, studying history, archaeology, and anthropology, and then went on to serve in both the Royal Air Force and the Royal Navy. His years in military service helped him grow into a man who valued discipline and duty, but even then, his personal life was never free from the eyes of the world. When Charles married Lady Diana Spencer in 1981, the world saw it as a fairy tale come true. Millions tuned in to watch their wedding, and for a while, it looked like the monarchy had been given a fresh, young, romantic face. But behind the palace walls, cracks began to appear. Charles's heart was never fully Diana's, and Diana knew it. From the very beginning, Camilla Parker Bowles was in the picture, and Diana famously said there were 3 people in her marriage. That truth became a wound that never healed. Charles and Diana's marriage was marked by unhappiness, affairs, and public scandals that filled newspapers around the world. By the time they divorced in 1996, the fairy tale was shattered. Then, in 1997, tragedy struck when Diana died in a car crash in Paris. The world mourned her, and Charles was left carrying the heavy shadow of guilt and blame, whether fair or not. For many, Camilla became the symbol of Diana's pain. She was labeled as the other woman, and public anger against her was strong and merciless. Yet Charles and Camilla's love never disappeared. Slowly, painfully, they rebuilt their lives together, and in 2005, they finally married, despite all the resistance and judgment. Through all of this, Charles tried to balance his personal happiness with his duty to the crown. He threw himself into work that mattered to him, creating the Prince's Trust in 1976, which helped countless young people. He championed causes like the environment, organic farming, and climate change long before they became global conversations. Many mocked him at the time, but today, people look back and see that he was ahead of his time. He wrote books, gave speeches, and used his position to push ideas he believed in. Yet for all his achievements, his personal life always drew more attention than his work. Every move he made with Camilla was watched and judged. Even after they married, it took years before the public slowly accepted her. And when his mother, Queen Elizabeth II, died in 2022, and Charles finally became king at the age of 73, the spotlight grew even brighter. His coronation in 2023 was historic, blending tradition with modern touches, but even then, whispers of scandal and criticism followed him. In 2024, when news of his illness became public, many wondered if his reign would be cut short. At a time when he needed stability and peace, the photograph of Camilla with a guard was a wound reopening, threatening everything he had built. This is why the moment in that private room was so powerful. It was not just a husband asking a wife about a rumor. It was a king confronting the ghosts of his past, the mistrust that never fully went away, and the danger that one more scandal could destroy not only his marriage but his crown. The question was no longer just about Camilla's loyalty. It was about whether Charles could keep the trust of his people and carry the monarchy forward in a world that had already seen so much of his pain. And for Camilla, it was another reminder that no matter how far she had come, no matter how many battles she had survived, the shadow of doubt would always follow her. That moment was not the end of the story, but the beginning of another storm in the long and complicated tale of Charles and Camilla. But where did this story of Camilla and the royal guard begin, and why did it continue to haunt them even after so many years? Long before Charles wore the crown and long before Camilla became queen, whispers about her loyalty floated through royal circles. People spoke of a man named Rupert Finch, a guard who was said to be close to Camilla. His presence was never splashed across the front pages like Charles or Diana, but among those who watched the palace closely, his name was mentioned more than once. He was charming, well-connected, and always near enough to raise questions. Was there truly something between them, or was it nothing more than another rumor blown out of proportion? The truth was never fully proven, and that is why it has remained alive for so long. In the absence of proof, rumors grow stronger, and for Charles, even a hint of betrayal was enough to cause doubt. It reminded him of his own past, of the years when he himself had been the one carrying out an affair with Camilla while married to Diana. Now the roles seemed reversed, and perhaps that irony cut deeper than anyone could imagine. Diana's ghost is always present in this story. Even now, decades after her death, her memory shapes how people see Charles and Camilla. For many, Diana will always be the true Princess of Wales, the woman wronged, the woman who never found peace in her marriage. And every time a new story about Charles and Camilla emerges, Diana's name is brought back, her pain remembered, and her shadow cast once again over the monarchy. That is why the rumor of Camilla's affair with a guard carries so much weight. It is not just about Camilla. It is about Diana. It is about history repeating itself. And for Charles, that repetition is unbearable. He has spent his life trying to balance love, duty, and the expectations of a nation, but the cracks never fully close. He has fought to make Camilla accepted, to present a united front, to heal old wounds. Yet the moment a rumor like this rises again, it feels like the walls are collapsing all over. Still, there is another way to look at it. Camilla has faced so much hate and survived. She has been accused of everything imaginable, yet she still stands as queen. Her strength is in her refusal to be broken. When Charles confronted her with that photograph, she did not cry, she did not argue, she did not beg. She stood firm. That in itself is a kind of power. Maybe she knew that no matter what she said, people would believe what they wanted to believe. Maybe she knew that silence was the only way to protect herself. To some, her silence looks like guilt. To others, it looks like dignity. And perhaps that is why the truth will never be fully known. Because sometimes, in the world of royalty, truth is less important than perception. What matters is not always what happened, but what people think happened. And in this case, perception could be just as dangerous as reality. As Charles continues his reign, this moment will linger as one of many storms he has had to face. His life has been shaped by duty, controversy, and constant change. He has lived through public scorn, private heartbreak, and the endless gaze of the media. And now, in his later years, he must still fight to protect both his marriage and his crown. Whether Camilla's relationship with the royal guard was innocent or not may never truly be known, but the fact that it haunts them shows how fragile trust can be, even at the highest levels of power. For the world, it is a story of scandal. For Charles and Camilla, it is their marriage, their life, their love, and their survival. And as history has shown us time and again, the truth in the royal family is never simple, never clear, and never without pain. What remains certain is that the crown may be made of gold, but the lives beneath it are made of flesh, blood, and heartbreak. And at 76, King Charles has proven that even a king is not free from the shadows of doubt, love, and betrayal. At 76, King Charles finally confirmed the truth about Camilla's rumored affair with a royal guard, and the world was left in shock. For decades, whispers had floated around royal circles, whispers that most people either dismissed as gossip or accepted as one of those untold secrets that the palace would never acknowledge. But sometimes gossip has a seed of truth hidden deep inside, and Charles himself, now older, weary, and struggling with the heavy crown he carries, could no longer pretend that these whispers had no weight. The story of Camilla's closeness with a royal guard was not just a piece of tabloid fantasy, it had lived in the shadows of the monarchy, quietly shaping how insiders looked at her and how Charles himself wrestled with doubts he dared not voice. It began innocently enough, or so it seemed. There were glances at formal events, quiet moments shared away from flashing cameras, and conversations that seemed warmer than mere politeness. At first, no one cared. After all, members of the royal household mix with guards, staff, and companions every day. But in the strange world of royalty, where every smile is analyzed, where every glance can be taken as a secret message, people began to notice. And once they noticed, they never stopped. Through the years, this rumor of Camilla and a guard became part of the invisible story of the royal family. Of course, it was always overshadowed by the much bigger scandal, her relationship with Charles while he was still married to Princess Diana. That was the scandal that made global headlines, the one that shaped how the public saw Camilla for decades. To the world, she was the villain, the woman who had stolen Diana's happiness, the reason the fairy tale marriage ended in heartbreak. For Diana's millions of supporters, Camilla would always be the outsider, the one who didn't belong. But what most people did not know was that alongside the storm of Charles and Diana's broken marriage, there were other quiet storms, other hidden questions. The whispers about Camilla and a certain royal guard never quite disappeared, and though the palace never confirmed anything, insiders spoke of a closeness that didn't look like just duty. Still, the official narrative was silence. Buckingham Palace never commented, never allowed a single statement that might fuel the fire. To the outside world, there was nothing to see, nothing to question. But the truth is, silence often speaks louder than words, and that silence kept the rumors alive. Charles knew better than anyone how much the world hated Camilla in the 1990s. After Diana's tell-all interviews and her tragic death, Camilla was despised. She was the face of betrayal. But Charles, stubborn as always, made it clear, his love for Camilla was not up for debate. He leaned on his advisors, particularly Mark Boland, to carefully rebuild her public image. It was one of the greatest PR projects in royal history. Slowly, Camilla began appearing at Charles's side in public. She met the Queen, she took on charity work, and she built a softer image. By 1999, she and Charles made their first public debut as a couple at the Ritz Hotel in London, where photographers swarmed the street, desperate to capture the moment. That was the beginning of a slow rehabilitation. Step by step, she went from hated mistress to accepted royal companion. By 2005, when she and Charles finally married, the public had softened enough to tolerate it. But still, many never forgot Diana, and never forgave Camilla. And somewhere beneath all of this, the rumor of a royal guard lingered like a shadow that refused to fade. Charles carried that shadow with him. He had fought for Camilla, defended her, and given her a place at his side despite enormous criticism. And yet, as the years went on, he could not deny that the story of her friendship with the guard had taken root in the public imagination. People wondered, if Camilla could have one affair, why not another? If she could betray Diana with Charles, could she betray Charles with someone else? These were not questions Charles liked to face, but as king, he could not escape them. He spent long nights awake, thinking about the fragile glass of the monarchy. His sister, Princess Anne, often reminded him that the crown is like crystal, once cracked, it can never be made whole again. Charles knew she was right. Every scandal, every rumor, every whisper could weaken the foundation of the institution he was now leading. And so, for years, he stayed silent. He buried his doubts, buried his pain, and carried on with his duties, determined to pretend that the past did not exist. But time has a way of wearing down walls. At 76, burdened by age and failing health, Charles no longer had the energy to pretend. The truth weighed too heavily. He finally admitted what the palace had always denied, that Camilla had indeed once shared a deep and personal connection with the royal guard. He insisted it had not been betrayal, that it had not crossed the line into infidelity, but he could not deny the closeness. In his own words, he said, "Affection does not always mean unfaithfulness, but it leaves scars all the same." Those words, quiet but powerful, were his way of confirming what so many had suspected. It was not the tabloid fantasy of a secret affair, nor was it the spotless innocence the palace once claimed. It was something in between, something human, something messy, something real. And in that moment, Charles revealed not just Camilla's shadow, but his own scars too. The confirmation from King Charles sent ripples through the royal family and the public. Some people saw it as proof of betrayal, proof that Camilla had once again stained the monarchy with scandal. Others saw it differently, as the weary words of an old man who had lived too long in the spotlight, who had endured too many secrets, and who simply wanted to let the truth breathe at last. For Charles, it was not about destroying Camilla, nor was it about protecting her. It was about honesty. After decades of covering up, denying, and spinning stories, he no longer had the energy to keep up the illusion. And perhaps, in his heart, he believed that the monarchy could survive the truth. After all, it had survived so many storms before. His parents' generation had endured the abdication crisis, when King Edward VIII gave up the throne for Wallis Simpson. His own generation had endured Diana's tragedy, countless scandals, and relentless criticism. If the monarchy could survive all that, perhaps it could survive the truth about Camilla.